religious argument. You are the one making a religious argument. We are both have different worldviews. You have unnecessarily and unfairly labeled yours as secular and scientific. Mine is much more anchored in science and reality, and you can't dismiss it just because I also happen to be a Christian. We're going to get to more headlines in just a second. Stay with us.
Children's rights. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter to educate yourself on how the rights of children are being attacked around the world and what you can do to become their champion. Our informational emails will keep you informed and equipped in the fight for child protection. Sign up today at thembeforeus.com/contact and follow us on social media at thembeforeus.today.
Hello everyone, I'm Tim Wildman, President of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Hey, we're going to the Holy Land on a tour in March of 2026. We can't wait to go back. My wife Allison and I have been leading these tours for over 2 decades, nearly 3 decades. And we're going in March of 2026 to Israel, see all the places that you've read about since you were a child in the Bible. Bethlehem, Jerusalem, the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, all of it. Going there. And also my sons Walter and Wesley are already going to Greece on the Footsteps of Paul tour. You can do either the Holy Land trip or the Footsteps of Paul Greece tour, or both. For all the information on these tours, go to wildmangroup.com. WILDMON group.com. You get all the information on the 2026 March Israel and Greece tours.
With today's Dr. Dobson Minute, here's Dr. James Dobson.
For my commentary today, I want to share a portion of a classic poem about old age, written by Oliver Wendell Holmes. I think you'll like it. It's called The Last Leaf on the Tree. I saw him once before as he passed by the door of the gate. The pavement stones resound as he toddles toward the ground with his cane. They say that in his prime, ere the pruning knife of time cut him down, round through the town. And if I should live to be the last leaf on the tree in the spring, let them smile as do now at the old forsaken bough where I cling. Is there a last leaf on the tree out there somewhere who needs a little encouragement today? Give him or her a call, won't you?
For more information on this topic, visit drdobsonminute.org.
Children around the world are being victimized. We need your help. Them Before Us is a global nonprofit dedicated to defending children's life, family, mind, and body. But we can't do it alone. If you've been called to protect children, please consider making a donation to support our Bible work. Your gift will support the education and training of parents, pastors, business leaders, and legislators. Visit thembeforeus.com/donate today and join us in our campaign to protect kids. Welcome back to Them Before Us on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to Them Before Us Radio. I'm your host, Katie Faust, founder and president of Them Before Us, here with my executive director, Josh Wood. And we just covered a story from Oregon of a foster mother who won a case against the state that wanted to force her to conform to an ideological litmus test before she could take in vulnerable children, and thank God she won. But adoption is really a part of the DNA of this country in a way that is hard for a lot of other countries to understand. For example, I used to work at a Chinese adoption agency, and the reason why there were so many Westerners who were adopting Chinese children is because there really isn't a tradition of adoption in the world of China. That the idea of filial piety and passing down your name to blood relatives is so significant that it's hard for them to conceive of adopting a non-relative. And yet, it is something that has been pretty prominent in American culture for several decades now. Well, there's been some new research that has come out about Americans' attitudes towards adoption, and Josh is going to kind of give you a little bit of recap. Some of this really surprised me, some of it I wasn't aware of before.
This is from our friends at the Institute for Family Studies. They cite that 3 out of 4 Americans in this report have a favorable or very favorable view of private domestic adoptions. I don't think that necessarily means they want to adopt, but 75% essentially are saying, I think adoption's a good thing. In 2022, there are about 25,000 private adoptions, but 2 million unintended pregnancies. And women navigating these unplanned or unintended pregnancies, they find are about 50 times more likely to abort than adopt. On the other hand, 1 in 3 Americans say they've considered fostering or adopting, but only 2 to 4% actually have. The Christian Alliance for Orphans, they cite that it's financial reasons, it's lack of space, some similar things like that. I'd be curious, Katie, being an adoptive mom yourself, my sister is adopted. I had teammates even back from college who have now fostered to adopt and have heard their stories. I would be curious what you think is at the, I'd probably just take it more broadly and say, talk about the landscape, this gap between people viewing it favorably, there being a massive number of unplanned pregnancies, a high rate of abortion, and a very small sliver that actually ever adopt. I always get caught in this, like, even how do I talk about it? It's not a strategy to expand your family, but people should feel called to adopt. But there are people who experience infertility who they go, oh, well, I guess I could adopt, and is that really a wrong thing to say? I feel like there's all sorts of landmines even when talking about this issue. You've helped me think about it well, that what's like a child-centric way to even approach this issue of adoption, especially for those couples who may be listening who are navigating a season of infertility and people have told them, well, why don't you just adopt?
Yeah, we have to encourage noble child-centric choices, regardless of what side of the coin that we're on here. So if you are kind of in that situation of the unplanned pregnancy, where you are now pregnant and, obviously there's some cause and effect there, so you had some volition and some agency getting to the point where you've got an unplanned pregnancy, but nonetheless, it can be very shocking, terrifying, unnerving, unsettling, especially if the father of the child is not all in on this. It's interesting because women who have very supportive partners or husbands or boyfriends very often choose to keep the child, raise the child, and are really happy with that. It is the times when the husband or father of the child is uninterested that really is the place where the woman gets put in a situation where now the baby's life might be at stake. And so this statistic that women are 50 times more likely to choose abortion than adoption is really heartbreaking. Something that we need to do in terms of, what is the solution? The solution is humanize the child. That is where our work is to say, you're not going to have a baby. You're not going to be a mother. You already have a baby. You're already a mother. That baby already knows you and loves you. You are the woman that baby needs. So, at Them Before Us, we spend a lot of time talking about how adoption is not the solution to an unplanned pregnancy. Parenting is the solution to an unplanned pregnancy. You're already a parent. You're already a mother. That baby already knows and loves you. So now you need to parent the child whenever possible with God's help and the encouragement of the community. The father should also conform to the needs and the rights of the child and love the mother and love the baby. That is what we need to be aiming for whenever we've got an unplanned pregnancy.
Not to get us in hot water, but isn't that what the challenge, I feel like, is people are so afraid, rightly so, of abortion, that there's like an attempt to make it, to I don't want to say glorify, but to really encourage that if you're going to choose death, adoption is so much better. And I think that's true, but what you're saying is, but the best option, and we can't ever forget this, is your child being connected to you. You are the mom. They need you.
It's interesting because the reason why we emphasize parenting and not adoption is because adoption involves loss. Adoption begins with loss. Adoption often results in a lifelong loss that the child never fully gets over, never recovers from. And there's a famous book in the world of adoption called Primal Wound that a lot of adoptees have called the Adoptees Bible, because it was able to help them put voice to a lot of the feelings and experiences that they had that they had never been able to name before. But this idea of something's missing, something's wrong, I'm constantly worried about being abandoned, I feel like there's a hole in my heart, I feel like I'm struggling to figure out my identity. And obviously, adoption is just society's response to child loss, but it's not the kind of thing that we should rush to or casually overlook. And unfortunately, Josh, I think you're exactly right. In our fierce protectiveness around defending children's right to life, in some ways, sometimes the pro-life world has glossed over some of the hardships, some of the loss, some of the trauma that children experience when they are placed for adoption, even if it's on the day that they're born. And it's interesting because I was on a podcast once with Abby Johnson. Both of us are adoptive mothers. Both of us were talking about the challenges that our children have experienced because they are adopted. And I will tell you, the amount of backlash that her followers gave her for talking about the downsides of adoption, because everybody was so worried. No, you can't ever mention that adoption is hard for the child, for the parent, because now you're going to push people towards abortion. And to that, both Abby and I say, walk and chew gum. You can do both. You can say children have a right to life, they shouldn't be aborted, and children have a right to their mother and father. Whenever possible, they should be raised by the two people responsible for their existence. And we can absolutely recognize that in those rare cases where adults are unwilling to do that, adoption is redemptive. But it should be really clear that it's not ideal. You know, as my good friend who's also an adoptive mother says, adoption is divine plan B. Divine plan A is all the adults do the hard work so that the baby does not lose their mother or father or their right to life. But in some situations, that's not possible, and adoption is divine plan B. But we need to think about it that way.
Is that hard? I mean, again, speaking from an adoptive mother's perspective, is it hard admitting that that your situation even is ideal, and maybe in some cases you may have had to invest more time, money, energy, counseling than had an adoptive son ended up in the family that they were born into. So you've put so much time and energy and effort and resource into trying to be helpful and loving and caring and safe. Is it hard to admit or to talk about or voice the best I can do? There's still going to be loss there. It's not like I can make it all go away no matter how hard I try.
So the truth is that recognizing that, as I often say, I can't fully compensate for everything my son has lost. My husband cannot fully compensate for everything our son has lost. It's actually freeing. It's freeing. And it's actually freeing for a lot of adopted children and a lot of adoptive parents. Because when we go into it with this mindset of adoption fixes everything, then when it doesn't, the child or the parents go, there must be something wrong. There must be something wrong with me for not attaching to this child immediately. The child goes, there must be something wrong with me, that I still have questions about who my birth parents are. There must be something wrong with me because I really struggle around the fact that I don't look like my siblings who are my parents' biological children. And a lot of that, I don't want to say it's gaslighting because I don't think anyone's doing it intentionally. I think we always did it with the best intentions to say, this is your forever family. You belong here. God wanted you in this family, and all of that can be true. But if you don't ever leave space for the fact that there is loss here, there are additional struggles, then when parent and child struggles, they actually are in serious, serious jeopardy. So like I've had a couple friends with very challenging adoptions who went into it going, this is going to fix everything, especially because I feel called to do this. And then it gets very hard for very long. Sometimes not just on the mom and dad, but sometimes on the other children that existed in the family first. And then they start thinking, how do I get out of this? And that is a problem. Where really the answer is, you don't get out of this. You stay faithful and committed to that child, and you recognize that there might end up being struggles for life, or at least for the long term. But your commitment to the child determines your relationship with them, not your emotions.
Well, that kind of segues into our second story here, another one from Institute of Family Studies, in the vein of parents doing and taking on very difficult things. The IFS put out a new study that talks about divorce rates and how they are declining. In 2019, 14.9 out of every 1,000 marriages ends in divorce. So there's been a decline. The claim that a newlywed couple has a 50%